Okay, we're the 14th of May 2023 as I start recording this video, and that's an evening talk. I intend to talk for 30 minutes, not more, and I want to talk about spirit. The reason why I've been recording, and I intend to keep recording these kind of videos, the evening talk, lunch talk, morning talk, etc., is because I have produced my videos on home economics. So now I don't feel the need to repeat in every video. I just put the links to the video on home economics. There are more than 15 hours with an enormous amount of references, books, links, pieces of advice, etc., etc. So I feel a little bit more relieved in the sense that I can produce more spontaneous videos in a way. Yeah, and now I've decided to promote books in some videos, or I don't know. Of course, this book by Ron Paul, this book by Jean Robin. It's very important, explain why, and this book by Mr. Per Byland, because precisely right-wing anti-racism is the ideal, that's the morally good, morally right ideal for Europeans. Here, Europeans mean white, but eventually for the whole of mankind, because that's the means of resolving conflicts between human groups. Left-wing anti-racism does not work, cannot work, and it leads to oppression, negative economic socialism or communism, and tyranny. Right-wing racism, it cannot work either. So the compromise, the ideal, is to judge people as individuals and not as members of group. But in order for such an ideal to be made wirklich possible, the institutions have to be leaning towards individualism, which means private property, freedom of association, free speech, independence, autonomy, power on a small local level, etc. That's the American ideal. Because in a socialist, here means bureaucratic, centralized, statist society, people, precisely, it prevents the development of individuals, and therefore people are judged predominantly as members of groups, class, ethnicity, religion, etc., etc., and it defeats the possibility of having genuine individualism, which is the cure, the remedy to negative ethnocentrism. Yeah, but I am not, and here Jean Robin apparently is partly Jewish, but he's consistently defending and promoting the ideals of America, the most noble and greatest ideal of America, and he's very open-minded because he discusses and exchange with right-wing white identitarians. Yeah, but that's the ideal That's why here I will make the connection with the development of spirit. These kind of ideas, they go together, because in order for a society to be in order for a society to be peaceful, it has to be free. And in order for a society to be free, there has to be economic freedom, and they kind of mutually reinforce one another. The ideas which are developed by libertarians in the noble sense, right-wing libertarians. Yeah, because here I know how right-wing white people think. They think in terms of ethnic collectivism, but even let us imagine that somehow Europeans, means white, form whatever an ethno-state in a few decades or whatever. The problem of the peaceful coexistence with others of different ethnic background will reappear. Even if whites could have their own state, or homogeneous state, they would still have relationship with people of most all other groups, economic, cultural exchanges with other humans, and the problem of the peaceful, harmonious coexistence of diverse groups, if it's not within a same society, it's between the, various nations, and the solution will always be the same, namely respect for individual rights, private property, an encouragement of tolerance, which is presupposed by a respect for individuals and their property. So yeah, because otherwise the relationship, they are like the cultural Marxist envision them, namely the dominant and dominated, oppressed and victims, and either one group has to oppress all the others, but then no one can be free because the oppressed they are dominated or enslaved through various tyrannical statist regulations. But the oppressor group, they would be not free either, because they would be in a constant state of paranoia, having to monitor, to control everything, to lie, to deceive, etc. That's why here that's a kind of a romantic, not romantic, but an idealist, not in the philosophical sense, but in the sense of a little bit naive, but actually it's partly true in a profound philosophical sense as well. That's what Plato already knew. The tyrants, they are not free, because they have to they live in constant fear of being overthrown and being they are afraid of their power to vanish. So they live in constant fear, the tyrants, no matter how powerful they might be. That's why, of course, the leaders, the rulers, the oligarchy, the elites, whether these are kings, emperors, tyrants, dictators, members of the party or whatever, they cannot be free, no matter how much domination they have over the society and the people and the citizens or the subjects or the slaves or whatever, because they live in fear constantly. So in order for freedom to exist, everyone has to be free. Here that's the dialectics of equality and liberty. They cannot exist independently. Here I have to give, I wouldn't say credit, but the intelligent Marxist, there are not many, but the intelligent Marxist intellectuals, they kind of understand this. Those who have a genuine philosophical background and who are trained as philosophers and who are genuine and honest, not the political manipulators, but the authentic, intelligent Marxist intellectuals. Here, just from a philosophical perspective, the legacy of Marx has to be acknowledged, at least in the realm of intellectual tradition. Politically, well, but politically that's much more dubious, obviously, but intellectually, it has to be at least acknowledged and sometimes respected. So here, the intelligent Marxists, they understand that precisely liberty and equality, they are in a dialectical relationship, and they presuppose and mutually reinforce one another. The stupid Marxists, they only want equality, which leads to tyranny and oppression and all the disasters of all official communist regimes of the 20th century and still to this day. And the radical libertarians, the reason why they do not appeal more, or the reason why they fail to convince, it's not because they lack intellectual rigor and consistency, it's because it appeals to really an elite, an anthropological elite, historically predominantly intelligent WASP, and also a few Jewish individualists, one might say, but it's potentially it can appeal to anyone, but it attracts predominantly whites, a few Jews, a few Asians probably, and sometimes people from other ethnic groups. But the ideal of libertarianism, potentially it can be universalized, but actually empirically it appeals to a very tiny minority of humans because it's very demanding, and most humans, they don't want to be free. They want to be taken care of. I can understand. But the problem is that they think that the state can, or the religious leaders, manipulative religious groups can take care of them, which, no. That's why the ideal here, that's the ideal of Charles Murray. The ideal, of course, is a society which brings forth a real elite. So here that's really the ideal of Charles Murray, which is also my ideal, namely a society in which the institution systematically promotes the emergence, the strengthening, the development of a real elite. So a society where there are, of course, inequalities, like in every society, but they are acknowledged and they are, in a way, respected. So that's kind of traditionalist, right-wing in a way, but where the elite deserves its position as an elite because of character, integrity, virtue, competence, excellence, etc., etc. Where the resentment between the lower status and the higher status is reduced to a minimum, because the higher status people, they justify their better positions, either economically or in terms of prestige, etc. That would be an aristocratic. Where is Jefferson? Here, no, I know where he's Jefferson, but that would be that was the aristocratic ideal of Jefferson, who was in his day a Democrat, not in a formal sense, but the democracy and aristocracy, they mutually reciprocally determine one another, and the unity of both, the unity of democracy and aristocracy in the classical European political tradition, is what we call the Republican ideal. Just democracy, this leads to mob rule and to socialism and to decadence and well, just aristocracy, it leads to corruption and oligarchy. The ideal, the middle in the best sense, in the Aristotelian sense of the top of the pyramid. Oh, there I'm making signs with my hands. No, the top of the middle is the top in a triangle. That's the Aristotelian view. That's the Republican ideal, not the modern Republican parties. Oh, those Republicans. Oh, I have good jokes about the American conservatives and the American Republicans. I'm talking about the politicians, not the people who vote for the Republicans, but the Republican politicians. Well, I will not tell the jokes now, but yeah. So the Republican ideal, which historically in the US was the Republican Party, but it has declined over time. But the Republican aristocratic ideal of Jefferson, it has been a recurrent feature throughout the history of Europe and the history of the West. But it has worked the most intensely and the most consistently in the United States of America. Yeah. And Ron Paul is the modern embodiment of this republican ideal, which was the ideal already in ancient Rome, ancient Sparta, ancient Greece at large, one might say, partly in the free cities and duchies of the Middle Ages, and the ideal which has shaken modernity since the Renaissance and the scientific revolution, etc., etc. That's the ideal of the West. That's the ideal. Here, Kevin MacDonald wrote a book, Western, the Western liberal tradition, individualism and the Western liberal tradition. The ideal of white people, at least Northwestern, Indo-European white people, the ideal which has been consistently trying to re-emerge and to establish itself over millennia, one might say, it's the republican ideal. Not democracy, not monarchy in the sense of Oriental monarchy, well, that's another word for despotism. White people, when they are in their righteous mind, they don't want one ruler, they don't want the rule of the masses, they want the balance between the two, namely an aristocratic democracy, which we call a republic. Not all republican political regimes are aristocratic, far from it. That's just a word that they use, but actually the word republic in the modern world, that almost doesn't mean anything any longer. The French Republic is a socialist, a proto-communist, completely corrupt, tyrannical state. The Republican Party in the US, well, it's slightly less corrupt, but yeah, but it doesn't mean the republics. Some republics in Africa, or it's just the word. It's completely meaningless. Yeah, but the ideal, the European ideal. Here, European means white people. The Western ideal is the republican ideal, which is potentially universal, but it appeals predominantly to Northwestern white. Yeah. And here, Jean Robin, while formulating this differently, he kind of agrees. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, it's been 18 minutes. So now I can talk about what I intended to talk about. I will talk about Emma Watson. I will put the link probably about Prada paradox. Yeah. There is a clip by Emma Watson about Paradox, a movie that apparently she made herself. Well, she says in the video about, she talks about her imperfections. I don't see any imperfection in Emma Watson. Where are the imperfections? She's perfect. Yeah. No, but she says I'm always different, but I'm always myself, or constantly changing, but always myself, and I cannot be framed, etc. That's an illustration of spirit and the movement of spirit. Yeah, because here precisely I will talk for the remaining dozen of minutes, one might say, about spirit. I have realized not by talking to ordinary people. Talking to ordinary people has made me realize that I had to simplify my way of communicating. I'm working on it, and by the way, I might actually not. I intend to on my singular life, UPS, universal particular singular. When I speak publicly on the internet, potentially anyone can access my ideas, but when I talk privately, only the person that I talk to receive the message. So I intend to work and to improve on communicating with people empirically about my ideas, which forces me to adapt in the good sense and to make my ideas more accessible. So as of now, while I record this video, I still talk normally with no counterpart, one might say, in the sense that I don't know who watches my video. Not many people. But I don't know who watches, when, what do they understand, and I cannot know because I don't. Maybe I don't know. Maybe you are, dear viewer. Maybe you are a South Korean. Maybe you are a student in the United Arab Emirates. Maybe you are a Brazilian person. Maybe you are an Afro-American. Maybe you are a Scot. So I don't know when I speak publicly. I don't know who watches what, when, what do they understand. But I intend on my singular level in my day-to-day life to eventually to communicate complex but in a good sense, namely intellectually demanding ideas in a simple way to people who really have not much culture. It's not derogatory because people either they do not have the time or the opportunity, or they have been brainwashed, or they do not have the interest, etc. But to try to communicate, as of now, economic ideas, that's what I've been working on, to potentially anyone, to make this intelligible. I dedicate a considerable amount of time to gather knowledge, master the knowledge, and then to be able to communicate to potentially an audience with no previous background. Here, as of now, it's about economics, but when I speak publicly, actually it's kind of nonetheless demanding intellectually what I say, and I do not intend as of now to make really very simple lectures. I already did this. Videos about introduction to philosophy, because there has to be a feedback, in a sense, who gets what, and the people who receive the message, what do they understand. So with no feedback in direct real time, it's very difficult to communicate. So yeah, but so talking with empirical people over the past few months has helped me realize that I had to simplify my views, because my worldview and my ideas, in a way, even when they are simple, they are complex nonetheless. But here, that's the movement of spirit. Watching videos by intelligent people but of a lesser intellectual complexity or profound insights than what I was used to. People like Matthew Siegel or Caroline or Apollonian German and others, or even the libertarians, people with. Here, I've been watching, for instance, politicians, debates of politicians, or alternative viewpoints, but the level of consciousness is much lower, one might say, which has made me realize that, now I can talk about the movement of spirit. A lot of people who are intellectuals, not official intellectuals, but who are public figures who speak about intellectual topics, so it can be politicians, journalists, or alternative content creator or influencer or whatever on the web. They might say intelligent things, but very few people among these public intellectuals in the broader sense, very few people develop and move and change and evolve intellectually, or if they do, it requires them a lot of time. And with the advent of the internet, since the totality of world knowledge, accumulated human knowledge, is made available, people can have access to the totality of knowledge, so that they can pick influence, inspiration here and there, and build their own worldview, like a bee picking up pollen on flowers to make honey, one might say. But a lot of intellectual people in the broadest sense, they are not very spiritual, in the sense that spirit is the life and movement of thoughts, and it consists in, like Emma Watson says, changing constantly in a way, but not in an incoherent, inconsistent way, but simply because when you search for, and when you are in a quest for understanding, or a search for the truth, you explore many blind alleys, one might say. You explore a lot of topics, a lot of viewpoints, and you constantly gather knowledge, and you constantly readjust, refine your view. And I've been thinking about this precisely because I've been listening to debates of Jean Robin, or videos of Jean Robin, and he's sometimes accused of being inconsistent or changing his views. But here precisely, that's what I intend to talk about when I started recording the video. There's a difference between constant change, which in the perspective of the development of and growth of spirit is good, but if it's not inconsistent, namely if there is an underlying thread, one might say, yeah, here that's precisely, there's a very important distinction between being inconsistent, which is kind of bad, and being constantly changing, which, if there is an underlying consistency, it's good, and actually it's very good. And this is what distinguishes spiritual people, the people that I have promoted, the individuals who are spiritual. They are the ones who have evolved the most, or in a very fast way, and who have developed and who have explored a lot, and who are still evolving. And this is precisely what being alive intellectually and spiritually means. It's self-movement, incorporating experiences and knowledge to strengthen oneself, to grow. That's life, that's intellectual life, intellectual development. And a lot of people, they are intellectually or spiritually dead, even if they are intelligent, because humans, they need stability. I understand there's a psychological need for stability, and to be framed in a way. That's what Emma Watson says. I cannot be framed, etc. Because humans, they need to categorize in order to stabilize a constantly moving and changing environment. But precisely, spirit consists in overcoming the attempt to categorize. That's the movement of the categories, because there are contradictions and there is evolution and development, etc. And the people who are constantly changing while remaining consistent to some underlying principles to which they are not necessarily even aware, but the people who change constantly without being inconsistent, they are really the best intellectually and spiritually, because they have the broadest perspective. And even if they can seem to err and to wander and sometimes to get lost, it's a moment in the development. And people like these, those that I have called variously the European gods and goddesses, and sometimes I've added people like Jean Robin, who comes from a different perspective, but actually he follows some sort of the same pattern of constant evolution and change without being inconsistent. These are really the most spiritual people because they have the broadest perspective, and they are the most intelligent in a spiritual way, although they are also intelligent in terms of IQ and in terms of general knowledge. But what distinguishes them and what makes genuine spirituality, as I understand this, which is actually consistent and coherent, it's not random assertion delivered from, I don't know, the Holy Spirit coming from God knows where. There are people who are spiritual in this sense, the enlightened spiritual leaders, etc. They receive divine inspiration or the enlightenment from God knows where. But they just are enlightened somehow, someday, and then they live in a state of bliss or of appeasement, which is good for them for the rest of their life. People like David Thomas Wisdom, in a different perspective, Eckhart Tolle, the gurus, not in a negative sense, but the spiritual leader like Amma, that's an Indian woman, Sadhguru, another Indian person. There are people like this. They are considered widely acknowledged as being spiritual leaders, and they live in a state of in a way they have a different level of consciousness, but they have received somehow illumination. I respect most of their views, and here David Thomas Wisdom, he is really one of the most enlightened beings in the world. So there is this spiritual revelation, which is kind of a little bit mysterious or mystical, and here spirituality, as I envision this, and actually that's how Hegel envisions this, because that's how it is in a way. That's not just spiritual enlightenment. We don't know exactly how it works. It's a unity of a verständig, which means rationalistic in the modern sense. When I speak about rationalistic, I think about Dawkins and the Anglo-Saxons, namely kind of have a narrow-minded, a little bit bland, but nonetheless rational in as we understand it. What spiritual people, and sometimes non-whites, spiritual non-white people and leftist spiritual people, what they accuse Western civilization of having brought, namely they accuse Western science. When leftists accuse Western science, spiritual leftists, when they accuse Western science, that's the verständig, namely the statistical framing of categorizing in a bland and boring way. I understand, because it's kind of dry and unsatisfactory. When you reduce nature to a mathematical equation, which is what Western scientists have been doing for 4 centuries now, it enables to understand enormously, and it produces tremendous effects in terms of technology, the ability to send spaceships to the moon, to Mars, or far away into space to gather knowledge. That's the product of Western science. And the tremendous improvement in medicine, surgery, health, etc. It's or logistics, architecture, infrastructure, etc. It's or computer science, etc. The tremendous technological development, of course, it's a result of this dry, boring Western scientific perspective, what I call sometimes the Anglo-Saxon mind, and it can be a little bit boring and dry because it's kind of a little bit dead, because it's formalism, as the boring German metaphysician would say. He accused Kant of doing formalism. You formalize, you categorize, etc., but it's kind of a dead. It can be useful, but it's kind of dead nonetheless. But true spirituality is precisely spiritual insight, but with the mediation of the verständig, which means the rationalistic, which means the scientific, as we understand this, modern Westerners, the scientific perspective. And the most spiritual people in this world, not only they are those who move and evolve the most while remaining consistent, unconsciously sometimes, or consciously, while having a consistent thread which guides unconsciously their spiritual evolution. So not only they evolve in a good sense and they change in a good sense, but also they have this scientific perspective while being interested in religious topics, whether Christianity or paganism, or shamanism, or the various spiritual views. And yeah. Yeah, I've understood this actually, that spirituality is a movement. It's an intellectual journey, an adventure, one might say, which consists in exploring, broadening one's own horizons, which means the willingness to acknowledge that one is ignorant. Here, that's the classical view of Socrates. All I know is that I know nothing. To be a philosopher, and philosophy eventually is spiritual, like religion, you have to acknowledge that you do not possess the truth, that you are on a quest. So it requires humility and to confess one's own ignorance. And in a politicized society, precisely politics, that's why I don't like politics, and the only politics that I like is libertarianism, because this is the attempt, the consistent, coherent, intelligent willingness and attempt to abolish politics, precisely because politics, it seeks to impose a truth onto others for status, power, money, influence, etc. It's completely antithetical with philosophy, because when you are a philosopher, precisely it means that you do not have the truth. You search for the truth. Yeah. That's why politics, whether left or right, turns people into idiots, because it's the realm of groupthink, herd instinct, herd mentality, ideological correctness. That's why here, it has taken me not a long time, but it has always been an underlying assumption that I was not necessarily aware of. But that's why, in a way, I've always been aware that I don't like politics, but the only politics that I like is libertarian, for the aforementioned reason, because the libertarians, they just want to lead and live their life without being burdened by society through taxes, regulation, and ideological discipline. Yeah. Because when you are a politician, here it's in a broader sense. It can be the small groups, whether right or left, the political groupthink. It works with religious groupthink as well. It's antithetical to truth, because you have to subordinate yourself to group discipline, and you have to preach to others to convince them of your truth, which means that you believe that you have the truth, which is, it can be a sign of confidence, but also a sign of arrogance in a way. And most people, they want to force their truth onto others, without how should I explain this? Without being legitimate to do so, in a way. What is legitimate? That's a philosophical debate, but the truth that the libertarians want to impose onto others is precisely reduce government, reduce coercion, private property. Every person does his own business, not only economically but also intellectually, ethically, etc. And no coercion, and the people, they will spontaneously have to adapt ethically and morally to one another to peacefully coexist, and it has existed empirically. Libertarianism is not a utopia in the sense of the way communist, leftist utopias are, because there have been libertarian societies 19th century America is the example of a libertarian utopia realized. Switzerland, partly, if we are a little bit less demanding, even England, at some moments, it has worked. And overall, the Nordic countries, the Netherlands, the Scandinavian countries, well, Germany, well, the Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands, etc. Even I was tempted to praise France, 19th century France, but well, let us just talk about the Scandinavian countries and the British countries and the British colonies, Canada, Australia, etc., and of course the US. Historically, they have been realized utopias because liberty, which was the idea, was not an abstraction, it was made wirklich in institutions, and it lived within the mind and the behavior and the spirit of the people. It's not, of course, it's not perfect, but it's much better. The results have been much better and still are much better than most other societies, and the proof is that most white people, they want to live in these societies. I know this because a lot of continental Europeans, when they have the opportunity, they go to Australia, Canada, the US, or even England. And because most non-whites who have the possibility, they also want to live in these societies. That's the reason why there are so many migrations and immigrants. It's because unconsciously they acknowledge, whatever they might say, they acknowledge that these societies are the best. That's why there are so many migrants, basically. That's paying homage to the greatness of the Anglo-Saxon libertarian ideal, because a lot of people, they want precisely to live in these societies, whether they are Anglo-Saxons or non-Anglo-Saxon whites or non-whites. A lot of people, whatever they might say, no matter how much they might complain about Americans or the English or the Europeans, colonialism, if you do not listen to what they say, but if you look at what they do, they want to live among the libertarians in the broadest sense. Yeah. Among the societies which historically have defended, promoted, protected the ideal of liberty the most. So people, they love, at least they do not necessarily love liberty, but at least they love the fruits of liberty. Yeah. And here I will conclude the underlying thread, or I say under my entire spiritual development since 2013, but actually 2016, but already 2013, has been Europe. Europe here means the European people. That's what I call America, Germany, and Europe. That this has been the underlying thread in various forms, various ways, because here the American ideal is, for me, the truth, in a Hegelian sense, the truth of Europe, of the European people, since already ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and throughout the Middle Ages and modernity, etc. The American, here I will praise the Americans, like I most of the time, like I do most of the time, but they are the most successful member of the European family, at least politically, and from a continental European perspective, here I speak as a continental European, we are proud of the Americans. They have been declining, of course, but yeah, here I've understood over the past few, I don't know, months maybe, that the Americans, they cannot realize how pretty they are, because they live in America, and we continental Europeans, we don't. So we see how beautiful America is, and the Americans, they don't, because they are so used to it. Yeah. So yeah, I will conclude briefly that constantly changing, if there is an underlying consistency, it's not it's not a proof of inconsistency, it's a proof of not necessarily maturity, but evolution and growth, which eventually leads to maturity, but it's a proof of growth. And a lot of people who are narrow-minded and limited, they see only the change, so they don't understand, because they have a narrow view. They don't see the underlying trend which has remained consistent. They only see the change, so they see incoherence, but it's because they lack the eye of knowledge, as Nietzsche would say. Here, that's why the individuals that I have promoted, here I'm not talking about Ron Paul, but I'm talking about the spiritual individuals that I have been promoting for many years now. I know that they are the best, because they are the most consistently and constantly evolving people, and yeah. And here I will make a remark. Caroline really is an exceptional woman. I mean, I'm not surprised, but she's really exceptional because her intellectual life and development has been constantly and consistently changing, but in a good sense. And for women, it's kind of rare to change in a consistent way, because women, they can be really inconsistent. But yeah, here it's not the case. So I have an ability to spot really exceptional individuals, and yeah. Yeah. Spirit is a movement. That's the idea that I've been. That's the underlying idea about the video, which was supposed to be 30 minutes long. But yeah, that's the underlying consistent idea that I've been trying to develop. Here I will do a little bit of formalism. Spirituality, in a way, that's the identity of identity and difference. So to remain the same while changing constantly, or to change constantly while remaining the same, that's precisely spirit. Yeah. I will conclude with a remark. Is the boring German metaphysician in his cloud, God knows where, if he could look down on me, I know he would say, well, not dumb, this kid, he's not an idiot. The idea that Hegel, the boring German metaphysician, that he might praise me as an individual. Well, I'm so used to getting negative criticism that the idea that Hegel might praise me, well, it's very difficult to receive a praise from Hegel, because he's so negative all the time that my relationship with Hegel over the past few months has been, well, so here it's getting a little bit warmer in a sense. Yeah. But seriously, here I will be positive. Whoever you are, if you develop intellectually, that's good. That's why here I will end with compassion and understanding. It's okay. It's okay to be wrong, precisely because I mean, I'm not justifying a stupidity or deception, etc. But making mistakes, of course, it's part of life, one might say. But it's part of a development, and you cannot know that you are improving if you do not make mistakes. And improving enables you to look backward on your mistake. But if the mistake are the moments which have enabled you to gain in growth and intelligence and wisdom and enlightenment, these are no longer mistakes in a way. That's a Hegelian view, but actually, yeah, that's why it's okay. It's okay to be wrong sometimes, because the purpose is to overcome stagnation and to keep growing in a way. Because when you make a lot of mistakes, but Hegelian mistakes, one might say, namely when you search and you stumble into blind alleys and you get lost and you go right back on your tracks, etc. When you move and you don't really know how, etc. It gives, in a way, a sense of humility, because when you have been consistently not deceived or deluded, but consistently searching, at least wandering without always being certain, when you have been constantly changing your viewpoints because you always find new stuff, new perspective, in a way it teaches you humility in a good sense. Namely, you are more open and you are more willing to forgive others, and you are more in a way, that's a self-reinforcing process in a good sense, because the more that you look backward on your intellectual and spiritual development, if you have had an exciting intellectual life, I might say, the more you understand that precisely it's a process with new experiences, new perspective, etc. So you are more open to keep growing in a way. So the more you grow, the more you are willing to grow and to accept others who are more slow in a way. Yeah. That's why here my view actually is quite complex, but it's very simple. Liberty is that which enable the movement, the life of spirit. So that's my consistent trend in spite of all my changes, because what enables all the changes and the growth and the development and the wealth, not the economic wealth also, although it also brings about economic wealth, but what enables the wealth of mind and idea and spirit and the wealth of life is liberty. Wealth is a consequence of liberty, economically, but intellectually and spiritually as well. Yeah. Yeah. That's what I had to say. Spirit is a movement And here I'm so compassionate that I understand the leftist, the socialist, because they want to, the good intentioned ones, they want to slow down the pace of the process of capitalism, as they call this. And I disagree in a way, but I understand. I understood this maybe a few weeks ago by reading this book, that actually the problem with liberty and capitalism, which is liberty in the realm of economics, is that in a way it's too great, it's too efficient, it's too great, and that's why the bad guys, here that's a libertarian perspective on socialism, the bad guys, in a way, you have to understand at least your opponent. When I say to defeat the opponent, yeah, but maybe also to partly to forgive. The socialists, most people, they just want stability in a world which moves very fast, and I can understand this. But the problem is that it brings about excesses in the other way. But I understand why liberty has to be balanced by stability. And here, paradoxically, usually the right-wingers, they are considered to be the keepers of tradition, conservatives, order, etc., and the progressive, that's innovation and progressivism precisely. So the progressives, they are innovative in morality and all sorts of political views, but actually they are they are conservative in terms of how should I explain this? The progressives, in the terms of economics and intellectual, these are right-wingers because they are in favor of freedom and liberty, which is that which enable progress, whereas they are classified as reactionary, conservative by the left. But actually the leftists, they are the ones who are in a way, leftists can be prone to innovation and experimentation, and this is one of the psychological traits of liberals, white liberals. They are open to new experiences, while the right-wingers, the conservatives, they are more reluctant, etc. But both sides have the characteristic of the other side, depending on what we're talking about, because yeah. To conclude what I've been just saying, that I understand why socialists in a broader sense, it includes right-wingers because there are a lot of right-wing socialists. I understand why a lot of people are socialists. In spite of the fact that socialism, economically and politically, has been proven consistently wrong, theoretically and empirically, so it has consistently failed, but I understand why it keeps reappearing in various forms, national, ecological, economic, whatever. It's precisely because there is a need within the human psyche to have stability, and here liberty, in a way, it's too great because it goes too fast. In a way, it produces too much changes, too much wealth, too much innovation. The pace, in a way, sometimes it goes too fast, and that's why there are so many people who are socialist, either economically or, here I would say, intellectual socialists. These are people who want to be boxed in. Here I will make a remark. 1 hour, okay. I know that there are people who are nostalgic of the Soviet Union, and I'm not talking about the leaders, the elites and the oligarchy, but ordinary people. They were nostalgic. That's the movie Goodbye Lenin in Eastern Germany, but in Russia and actually in most former communist, officially communist states, there are a lot of people who have been nostalgic of the fall of the Soviet Union, because life was kind of bland and boring and they were poor, etc. But they had a stable life. It was stable, and it appeals to a certain aspect of the human psyche, and it appeals to some people more than others. There are some. Every person needs stability on an individual level, but there are people who are more prone to seeking stability, and for these people, the complete failure of socialism politically, economically, was kind of a success because it offered stability. Yeah. Yeah. So I understand. But the problem is that in the recent decades, a lot of changes here I speak about Western countries, a lot of changes have been brought about not by capitalism but by the state. The demographic changes, this is not capitalism, because capitalism means private property, the right to associate or exclude and disassociate. The demographic changes have been implemented by the state. And these are tremendous changes. The changes in customs brought about by the welfare state, the dissolution of civil society replaced by a bureaucratic management of and transfer and redistribution of wealth. This is a tremendous change, an anthropological change, and social and ethical and cultural change, which is caused by the state. The washing away, not the erasure of private charities replaced by a bureaucratic centralized state which controls and monitors the lives of everyone. This is a tremendous change which has negative consequences brought about by the state, not by capitalism. And here, I will end by praising America, as I envision this. The middle Americans, in terms of geographic, the people who live in middle America, on their farm or their ranch, or the Twin Peaks people, one might say, or the farmers in the Midwest, or the people who live on a ranch in Southern America, precisely, they are maybe the perfect synthesis. They are very grounded, rooted, stable people. They have a simple life, but they live in still the most free country on this planet. So they are, in a way, they are pro free market, pro capitalism. Not all of them are, but they are supposed to be pro free market, pro capitalism, while being rooted in relative stability. Yeah, so that's maybe the good synthesis. If you are completely uprooted, these are the disconnected elites of the West Coast, the Silicon Valley, or New York on the East. If you are rooted without the freedom software, this brings about stagnation. So maybe middle America, geographically middle America, maybe that's the perfect balance. Yeah. Twin Peaks. Yeah, Twin Peaks. But I know that's a completely idealized view of of America, but Long live the Twin Peaks people. That would be my conclusion. Long live the Twin Peaks America. Yeah. I will end the video here.